Okay, we are continuing to study about transformations. We know that there are 4 different types of transformations. We have translations, reflections, dilations, and what we are learning today is about rotations. And we discussed in class about the earth rotates on its axis. But we know we don't go around and talk about people rotating. The most common word we use for rotation is a turn. So a turn around a fixed point called the center of rotation. The figure rotates at a specific angle and direction. We have rules for rotating, and these rules apply to counterclockwise. That means the second hand on the clock is going backwards. So if you think about the clock, counterclockwise, it goes backwards. So if we were to rotate triangle ABC to triangle A prime, B prime, C prime, okay, we would rotate it 90 degrees counterclockwise. Well, 90 degrees counterclockwise put the new image in quadrant 2. So if you think about counterclockwise, then what is it if it's clockwise? So clockwise, okay, this would be 90 degrees. This is another 90 degrees and an additional 90 degrees. So a 90 degree counterclockwise is the same as 270 degrees clockwise. Now in your foldable, you also took notes that will help you. So you can also use those notes as well. So we're going to continue to build on 90 degree counterclockwise. From our foldable, we know if we're giving X and Y, okay, we multiply the Y by -1 and we switch them up. So it becomes a negative X, comma, Y recorded. So we multiply Y by -1, then switch the coordinates. Next, we have 180 degrees counterclockwise. So 180 degrees counterclockwise, given triangle ABC in quadrant 1. If we go 180 degrees, our first turn is 90 degrees, and a second turn is 180 degrees. So if you notice, 180 degrees counterclockwise is the same as 180 degrees clockwise. So, in your notes, we know if we're rotating 180 degrees counterclockwise, if we're giving coordinates X and Y, if we rotate 180 degrees counterclockwise, then we will multiply both coordinates by -1. So our new image would be -X, comma, -Y. Our last one is 270 degrees. So if I'm rotating triangle ABC counterclockwise, that's 90 degrees, that's 180 degrees, and that's 270 degrees. So 270 degrees counterclockwise is the same as 90 degrees clockwise. Okay. 270 degrees going backwards will put our new image in quadrant 4. In order for that image to be in quadrant 4, if we were to go clockwise, just like the second hand on the clock, we still want it to be in quadrant 4, so it's only 90 degrees. So how would this change our coordinates? If we are giving x, comma, y, we will multiply the x coordinate by -1, and then we will switch the coordinates. So it will look similar to this. We multiply x by -1, so it'll be a negative x here, and y. We have to switch them up. Well, you want to remember these rules by multiplying, because sometimes you're giving coordinates could already be a negative. So you got to remember this rule. And we're going to move on and graph and label each figure and its image under the given rotation about the origin. I'm going to do some examples for you, and then I'm going to let you try on your own. Okay. Here we have 270 degrees clockwise. We have trapezoid JKLM with vertices. J is 3, 4. K is 6, 4. L is 8, 1. And M is 1, 1. So the first thing I want to do is graph trapezoid JKL. And notice what I did in the classroom. I always start out by putting my numbers on the number line and labeling my axis. This will help you in graphing much more efficient. So if you go ahead and number those number lines, it will help. Also, a few days ago, I sent you a picture of the coordinate grid. So if you're still having trouble on where to graph points, use those notes that I sent and remind. Point J is 3, 4. I have a positive and a positive, so it should be in quadrant 1. And I label that point. K is 6, 4. Start at the origin, crawl to 6, walk up to 4, label K. L is 8, 1. Start at the origin, crawl to 8, walk up to 1. M is 1, 1. Start at the origin, crawl to 1, walk up to 1. And I label. Okay, we're going to connect the plots in this same order. Start with J, move to K, L, and M. So it's J, K, and this is L. Forgot to label it. And M, and then go back up to J. So there we have a trapezoid. Now we are going to rotate this 270 degrees counterclockwise. This polygon is currently in quadrant 1. In order for us to rotate 270 degrees counterclockwise, if I move it from quadrant 1 to quadrant 2, that's 90 degrees. If I rotate it again, that would be a total of 180 degrees. It will be in quadrant 3. And rotate it again to quadrant 4 will make it 270 degrees. So we want to rotate this image 270 degrees counterclockwise. If you go back to your notes, you know that counterclockwise is stated in your notes that you have X and Y, okay? But it should yield like this. So you have to multiply X by -1. So I want to multiply all these X coordinates by -1. So J would be, if I multiply it by -1, it'd be -3, 4. K would be -6, 4. L would be -8, 1. And M would be -1, 1. Because I multiply X by -1. But we're not done yet. Because once you multiply it by -1, you have to go back and then switch these up. So for my J prime, for the new image, is no longer -3, 4. It will become 4, -3. K would become 4, -6, because we're switching these. L would become 1, -8, and M would become 1, -1. So now we're ready to apply our new image. J prime is 4, -3. And that's J prime. K prime is 4, -6. And notice we are in quadrant 4, and this is K prime. L prime is 1, -8. And M prime is 1, -1. Remember, I stated in class that you do have to read and also be able to comprehend, just like you do in reading text and language arts and science and social studies. So now you have the trapezoid that is rotated 270 degrees. I'm going to go back to number 1 and do 90 degrees counterclockwise. So here, first thing we need to do is to graph the pre-image. We have triangle ABC. So first we need to graph triangle ABC. Okay, before I start, I go in and number my number lines so I do not get confused. Okay, just like a number line, and it also helps in graphing. Positive is above 0. If I'm above the sea level, I'm above ground. If I go below sea level, I'm negative. Okay, now I'm ready to graph triangle ABC. Triangle ABC, vertices A is 2, 7. That's a positive in quadrant 1. B is 6, so start at the origin, crawl to 6, walk up to 5. That's A and B. C is 4, 1, start at the origin, crawl to 4, walk up to 1. I connect A, B, C, and I have my triangle. Now you can use a straight edge if you don't have a ruler. Use something that you can line up to make your line segment a little straight. Okay, if you don't have a ruler. Okay. So now we need to rotate 90 degrees counterclockwise. So go look at your notes at the top of the sheet. If you're 90 degrees counterclockwise, we have to multiply y coordinate spell coordinate, multiply y coordinate by -1, and then we're going to switch the coordinates. So if I multiply A, the 7 is my Y. I want to multiply it by -1, so it becomes 2, -7. B becomes 6, comma, -5. The only thing now we're doing is multiplying the Y coordinate by -1. And C will become 4, -1. Now that I have multiplied the Y coordinate by -1, in order to rotate it 90 degrees counterclockwise, I want to now switch these up. So A becomes -7, 2. B becomes -5, comma, 6. And C becomes -1, comma, 4. Now I'm ready to plot my new image. So another way to check it, you're going 90 degrees counterclockwise. That means this triangle should move from quadrant 1 to quadrant 2. That's another way to check. So let's start graphing. -7, 2, and that's A prime. B prime would be -5, go up to 6. That's B prime. C is -1, comma, 4, C prime. So I connect A prime, B prime, C prime, and then connect this. So I have just rotated triangle ABC 90 degrees counterclockwise. If you need to pause the video, you may. If you need to rewind, you go back and rewind. I'm going to do one more example, and you should be able to do the rest on your own. Okay, number 2, we have square PQRS with vertices. P is 2, 6, Q is 6, 5, and R is 5, 1, and S is 1, 2. So I want to graph my pre-image first. Before I do that, I'm going in every time I number these number lines. Number 1, -2, -3, -4, -5, -6, -7, -8. -1, -2, -3, -4, -5, -6, -7. Someone mentioned in class that you have to write very small, because we're going to talk about this later on, because I have a dilation of your sheet. All right, so now let's go in and graph square PQRS. Start at the origin, crawl to 2, walk up to 6, and label P. Q, 6, 5, label Q. R is 5, 1. And S is 1, 2. I'm going to connect P, Q, R. Notice how a ruler would be nice. R, S. Okay. Now I want to rotate 180 degrees. So we don't really have so big of a rule when we rotate 180 degrees. This is probably one of the easier ones. There is a rule. I do want to correct that. There is a rule, but it doesn't change if you're going counterclockwise or clockwise. So that's what I mean. If I rotate this 180 degrees counterclockwise, that's one turn. That'll be 90 degrees. 2 turns. Okay, that's counterclockwise, and it's going to put the new image in quadrant 3. But if I were to rotate it clockwise, that's 90, and that's 180. So it would still be in quadrant 3. Okay, so that's why when we see rotation of 180 degrees, it doesn't specify clockwise or counterclockwise. Now, we do have a rule, so if you go back and look at your notes, when you are rotating 180 degrees, we say that we need to multiply both coordinates by -1. Okay, so let's do that. We're gonna multiply both by -1. P prime, multiply 2 by -1, 2 times -1 be -2. 6 times -1, -6. My Q prime would become, multiply 6 by -1, be -6. 5 times -1, -5. R prime would become -5, -1. And S prime, -1, -2. So now let's graph our new image. -2, -6. And that's P prime. Q prime is -6, -5. So I'm gonna erase this. -6, come down to -5. It's Q prime. R prime. R prime is -5, -1. And I'm labeled. S prime is -1, -2. And I'm gonna connect them in the same order. P, Q, R, S, and then connect. So now you have this shape that is rotated about the origin. Now, if we're talking about rotating about the origin, you want to think of if you had an arm that started at the origin, okay, and this arm has to pick up this shape and it's going to rotate it just like the hands of a clock, the center of a clock. So that's how we rotate it. This arm would pick up the shape and it would turn it. So you see how it would be in that new the new image. That is our lesson on rotations. If you have any questions, you may ask them tomorrow in class.